If you ask the average citizen of your country during 2011 if they knew what Terraria was, the average reply would have been, "Please stop harassing me." Or, "Isn't that 2D Minecraft with the big flying?" And in order to not be bullied for the next 6 months, you would just say, "Yeah, you're not too far off." Which brings up a common pattern. The Big Eye, or the Eye of Cthulhu, Terraria's most iconic boss. 9 out of 10 people know what the Eye is, and only 1 out of 10 people know what the Moon Lord is. Why is that? On the 16th of May 2011, after multiple months of grinding and developing, Relogic finally released the 1.0.0 update of Terraria to the public. And with that, the 2D Minecraft allegations were born, and we got to witness the birth of Terraria's most iconic boss, the Eye of Cthulhu. During this time, there were only 3 other bosses, so defeating it was quite a big accomplishment, especially considering the fact that 1. No one knew what the hell they were doing. 2. The majority of weapons were quite hidden and unknown about, so most people were fighting the Eye using weapons like the gold short sword and wooden bows. And finally 3. The game was just much different from now, and the smallest things made the fight different. I mean, at that time you needed to jump over any height of blocks. The average Let's Player and Reddit user seemed to have struggled at this fight during this time period, so it's fair to say and assume that the Eye of Cthulhu was a fairly respectable boss during this era of Terraria. And it looked like they would stay this way, maybe becoming easier as new weapons and more knowledge about the game was being discovered, or really just staying the same. It's kind of impossible to tell because in the end, it was just the normal mode Eye of Cthulhu. However, on the 30th of June 2015, Relogic would drop one of their biggest updates to date, the 1.3.0.1 update. This was quite huge for Terraria because it added a whole new section to the game and made it a lot more defined than it was already. But what does that have to do with the Eye of Cthulhu? I have no clue, honestly. Just kidding. Because now when you create worlds in Terraria, a new section pops up. Normal and Expert mode. The idea of Expert mode was to make the game more challenging than it already was. Something Terraria is very good at. And at the time, and to be honest up to now, the skill gap and difference between normal mode and Expert is still huge. Enemies do more damage, have more health, more speed, and drop rates. And drops are different. Oh yeah. And another thing about Expert mode, bosses also change, getting the ability to go into a second phase, which the Eye of Cthulhu was also going to be a part of. When the Eye of Cthulhu loses around half its health, it enrages, becoming a mouth and starting to dash forward. Not much different from before. Oh my god. The Eye can now start dashing. This made the fight much more interesting than from before, and certainly made it worth doing because after dealing with this new nonsense, a bag would drop, containing one of the best pre-hard mode items, the Shield of Cthulhu. Now we can get into a whole new argument about the Shield of Cthulhu and if it's any good or not compared to other accessories. However, the main public opinion on this would simply be that it's a really good accessory and that a lot of people, including myself, use it until post-Plantera because of Master Ninja Gear. Some people even use the shield instead of the Master Ninja Gear because it can provoke knockback against enemies, which proves to be useful or useless in certain situations. The point is that the fight became worth doing in any playthrough that you did because the Shield of Cthulhu is just a solid ass item, putting the Eye of Cthulhu as a top tier pre-hard mode boss. The Shield of Cthulhu combined with the fact that the Eye now has a new major attack pattern in Expert mode made this fight much more interesting, and the large majority of people were here for it. Once again, going through the patch notes and updates of 1.3 and just in general looking at all the new changes of the Eye, it looked like it was going to be in a safe and stable position for the next few years. Except, no. By now you should have expected this pattern from the creators of Terraria themselves, Relogic. You see, when the game was first released, the Eye was nothing more than a basic boss to look over. However, as time went on, it was time to up their game. And that's when they added Expert mode, which completely changed the difficulty of the game and gave purpose towards fighting every boss, unlocking the treasure bags. So why not just release a new difficulty? The 1.4 update completely changed how Terraria was being perceived and is often regarded as the best update of the game's history. Many sales were made, and to be honest, it looked like things were going to go really well for the game, except it was advertised as the final update. However, no one believes this phrase from Relogic anymore, as at this point, it's simply the boy who cried wolf except Terraria. Regardless of all that, with 1.4, many new items came out, the update added many new things. The update added things related to NPCs and housing, more difficulties, seeds, Easter eggs, and much more. At a certain point, Expert mode was just cakewalk for most people, so it was time to add a new difficulty to spice up the game and make it interesting. What did they do exactly? Master mode. So once again, more health, damage, speed, and bosses became more difficult, and that's about it to be honest. A lot of Terraria gamers were accustomed to the difficulty of expert mode, and it was really just time to make the game more difficult than it was, which is what they did. The Eye of Cthulhu was not an exception to this new rule of difficulty. Along with the other bosses, he would gain more speed, damage, and health, proving itself to be a much more challenging fight compared to expert mode, and even a much more difficult challenge compared to normal mode. However, what was the reward for defeating such a behemoth like the Eye, or really any boss within this difficulty? Well, you got these sick ass boss pets, and the Eye of Cthulhu is easily one of the best ones. But that's an argument for another video. It looked like the Eye could finally rest and just be considered a challenging pre-hard mode boss in its respective difficulties, drop useful items such as the shield and pet, and just kind of chill. However, you know how this goes. Instead of keeping normal master mode Terraria, a few updates later, a new seed with a new difficulty would come out. The legendary zenith seed, the zenith legendary seed, whatever it's called, would be the newest difficulty and hardest difficulty up to date. Enemies and mobs are once again extremely buffed and do crazy damage. Same thing with the bosses, extremely buffed, crazy damage. The Eye of Cthulhu would also be in the category of these bosses, meaning once again he would become more difficult. It's crazy to think that almost a decade ago, people thought that the expert mode Eye of Cthulhu was extremely difficult to beat and would never imagine a seed that spawns you in hell and makes navigating around the world almost impossible, along with enemies that do stupid damage and have stupid health, but here we are. And the reward this time for beating these bosses in the seed would simply be nothing. Let's rewind a bit to the beginning of 1.4, because the For the Worthy seed dropped and made the game even harder. Never mind, let's just skip that because we already have gone through these steps multiple times. It's master mode but harder, but less hard, if that makes sense. I seem to have blabbered on and on about the evolution of the Eye of Cthulhu, but simply put, what makes it iconic? I mean, when the game released it had 3 bosses, but the Eye is the one that people remember. Kind of like how the Creeper is the iconic Minecraft enemy, instead of the Ender Dragon. In Minecraft's case, the boss is bigger and probably took much longer to develop compared to the Creeper, which was an accident from my understanding. The same thing goes on with Terraria. The Eye of Cthulhu when the game first dropped was just a bigger enemy. However, Skeletron and the Eater of Worlds were also bigger dummy enemies, so what makes it different? It would have to do with being the first boss to catch you off guard. If we go back to Minecraft, most enemies simply just slapped you and hit you. However, the concept of the Creeper was that it exploded when you got close, which was very different and made it an interesting phenomenon. Getting hit wasn't very worrying because you could simply run away. However, the Creeper would sneak up on you and once again, the same concept applies for Terraria. Most enemies like the slime and zombies were not worrying at all. So a big flying eyeball with some attack patterns was definitely new and made the boss memorable, because once again, it was the first thing that stood out from the rest and marked itself as different. So, I don't know, subscribe or something, I don't know.